Hello and welcome to Only the Best Independent Wrestling Podcast. I'm Russell Franklin. To get all the new episodes of this podcast emailed right to you, as well as wrestling writing from me on topics from the 80s, the 90s, and the modern scene, as well as stories from my experiences interacting with assorted wrestlers as a magazine writer and pro wrestling referee in the 90s, please subscribe to my free email newsletter, The Pro Wrestling Exuberant. You can do that at russellfranklin.substack.com. If you're an independent wrestler or promoter and have matches that you would like to see featured on future episodes of this podcast, I encourage you to contact me at tpwemedianetwork@outlook.com with match recommendations, and I will seek them out. Fans are also welcome to email suggestions too from their favorite local promotions and or their favorite local wrestlers. This episode I'll be showcasing more outstanding independent wrestlers and the promotions they wrestle for, including 4 different promotions from last time. Only the Best Independent Wrestling Podcast is a curated collection for you of independent wrestlers who I think are doing outstanding work, and I recommend as wrestling fans you seek out their matches. Now, I watch a lot of independent wrestling on a monthly basis, and I enjoy independent wrestling tremendously. I like discovering new wrestlers to me as a viewer, wrestlers who haven't been in WWE, AEW, or TNA, or any other visible promotion with a national platform. They haven't got that first significant quote-unquote break, so to speak, yet, and I emphasize the word here, yet. So these wrestlers that I'm quote-unquote discovering, they're talented, entertaining, and they're fresh to me as a viewer. And it's fun and it's exciting feeling to me as a wrestling fan to find new wrestlers whose work I enjoy, to follow their careers, watch their matches regularly, and root for them, in their own aspirations to reach a higher level in the world of professional wrestling. Every month I'm adding independent wrestlers, and promotions too for that matter, to a list that I keep of talent that I want to see more matches of, and that I plan to talk to about here in future episodes to make other fans more aware of them too. The independent wrestling scene is full of a lot of tremendously talented wrestlers, both in terms of the in-ring work and the mic work, and many whom combine both at a very high level. I referenced this last episode, but it's a fallacy to think the quality of independent wrestling itself is at a lower level just because it's an independent wrestling promotion. I've watched so many independent wrestlers just in the last month alone who, through their matches or mic segments, they are talent-wise capable of being in WWE or AEW right now and would do well if given a chance. And there's a lot of others I've seen that I would put into the category of having great potential. Perhaps newer to being a wrestler, maybe in their first year or two, but they certainly show signs of greatness to reach a higher level one day, to have that potential, and I'm excited about following their careers. It's different things that stand out to me about a promising talent and makes me think they have the potential to go far. It was this way when I used to write about rising wrestling stars for newsstand wrestling magazines in the early 90s, people who weren't known yet, who I saw elements of potential early greatness in. It could be their look, their ring presence, their in-ring work, their promos, often a little bit of all of it. I'd watch them and feel they have the potential as they gain more experience and further fine-tune their presentation to go to the next level of pro wrestling. Some of them to be perhaps at an upper or main event level too. What else do I like about independent wrestling besides discovering new and outstanding talent to enjoy? I like watching shows that take place in a more intimate setting, smaller venues, smaller crowds. It's a much different experience than watching WWE and AEW, and I enjoy watching those too. And I like in general also watching wrestling shows that take place in front of very large audiences, seeing a huge number of fans reacting to something, or the general spectacle of a large event. That can be a lot of fun to watch. However, there's something really special to me about seeing wrestling as a viewer in a smaller setting like on most independent shows, whether it's watching it on your television, your computer, or seeing it live. For one thing, there's a lot of crowd interaction. The wrestlers yell stuff at the audience members yell back, the two parties acknowledge each other. It feels very personalized. Attending independent shows is an experience as well, just all in itself, and I highly recommend it if you've never done so. Besides the high quality matches and a lot of hardworking talent you're likely going to find, you're also going to be very close to the ring. For many of us, closer than we've ever been before at a show with a major promotion and at a very affordable price. Regarding the current scene of independent promotions, there's a lot of high quality operations out there. They do a very, very good job in presenting their product. They have storylines that carry from show to show. They have champions, factions, good camera work, quality commentators. Most of the best ones remind me a lot of the footage I've watched of certain territory promotions that had weekly TV shows back in the early 80s when those thrived. I didn't get to see those as they were actually happening, but over the years I've gone back and really tried to make an effort to seek out that footage, and I really enjoy it. I was captivated by independent wrestling and the concept of it when I first saw an independent wrestling show, which was back in 1989. At the time, back in 1989, the concept of a standalone independent wrestling show was largely new, and especially the concept of an independent show with a former TV wrestling star on the card, being featured in the main event. The first independent show I went to had Nikita Koloff in the main event and Sam Houston in the co-main event, and both were very fresh from being on NWA TV shows. The territory system of regional full-time operating promotions was only a few years removed from having disappeared at that time, and independent promotions were largely struggling to draw fans back then and find their footing. This would all change within a few years. By the mid-90s, the independent scene would be vibrant. The promotions would have carved an identity and a fan base by running both regular shows and developing rosters of local wrestlers, as well as implementing light storylines and feuds as part of the shows. Now, back in the early 90s, the only chance it seemed for most independent shows to make a profit enough to survive was to load the card with local wrestlers, most of them with not too much experience and often varying degrees of skill. Some of them were trained formally, some were not, but the common thread usually being they were willing to work either for free in the name of gaining experience or a relatively small fee. Then what the promoters would do is spend the majority of the show budget on bringing in a name wrestler or a legend. If it was a name wrestler, it would be someone very fresh off WWF or WCW TV. They would book them in the main event, have them wrestle one of the local wrestlers with the idea that would sell tickets, having the wrestler that was fresh off TV headlining the card. The independent promoters back then were trying to fill the gap left by the whole disappearance of territory promotions with full-time rosters, week-to-week cohesive storylines, and locally broadcast television shows. So the independent promotions of the early 90s, when I first really got into it as a fan, they weren't really promotions at all in the traditional sense of the word. I speak this from living it, not just as a fan, but also writing for wrestling magazines in the early 90s, profiling a lot of what would now be defined as quote-unquote independent wrestlers, getting them their initial publicity in national newsstand magazines because I thought they were talented and had potential to reach WWF or WCW, the two major promotions of the era when I was a wrestling magazine writer. As the wrestling magazines died around 1993 and as print media began to show the first signs of struggling, this is even years before the internet became a factor, I transitioned to becoming a pro wrestling referee, and I worked the independent circuit for much of the rest of the decade. Independent promotions of the early 90s would often just be one-off shows. Many of these promotions, if you could call them that, they only ran one or two shows and no more. And then somebody else would come into the same area, run one or two more shows. And if they drew, they might run a few more, or they might never promote again. This was much different than the heyday of the territory system of the 60s, 70s, and 80s before independent wrestling became prominent. By territory sense, I mean a region typically covering multiple states where a promotion runs shows in mainly small towns, but at least one city, often at the same venues from week to week. These promotions also had a TV show that aired on a local station, and the idea with the TV show was it was designed to get fans interested in buying tickets to see live events. And this was the operating model of the vast majority of professional wrestling promotions in the U.S., again, largely from the early 60s into the 80s. Of course, WWE went national in the mid-80s, and that changed the face of professional wrestling. A pro wrestler in the late 70s, early 80s WWE called WWWF at the time, certainly wouldn't have ever thought that the promotion they were wrestling for, a regional operation that promoted just in the northeastern part of the United States, would change the entire landscape of professional wrestling in the United States in a decade. Many wrestlers in the transition out of the territory system were not able to find viable full-time livings outside of working for WWE and NWA and a select few other promotions. In the end of the territory system and the roots of the path to a widespread independent wrestling scene in the United States will happen, ironically, because of WWE, the very promotional force responsible for decimating and moving along the collapse of the territory wrestling system. The path begins when the son of the promoter, who is known to fans as a TV commentator, buys a promotion from his father in 1982. The son will change the name of the promotion shortly thereafter from WWWF to WWF, later to become WWE a decade and a half later, and they will single-handedly decimate the territory system, and this will usher in a new era where this promotion will ultimately reign supreme and for the most part never have a serious competitor. The new owner will do this through a combination of signing top talent from each territory, essentially gutting the rosters, running the same towns with a more loaded talent roster, and obtaining the local TV slots from them. The commentator's name, the person who will do all this, is Vince McMahon Jr. That's a whole other story, though. Let's get started on the independent wrestlers, their matches, and the promotions being showcased for this episode. First up is New Texas Pro Wrestling, based out of Houston. They currently run a couple of shows a month in different areas in Texas besides Houston. I recently saw one of their shows for the first time and I liked it a lot. The camera work was solid. The commentating was good. They gave background a little bit on all the wrestlers, which is important to me as a new viewer and not being familiar with or have ever seen any of them before. The matches themselves were all very good. Hardworking wrestlers across the board, from opener to main event. And I've added this promotion to my independent viewing recommendation list after viewing just one show. Often with independent promotions, the champion of the promotion, what he brings in his presentation, and how long he's been champion, gives a good glimpse on the overall quality of a roster. Case in point is the champion here, Stephen Wolf. The commentators mention he's been champion for over a year. His match I'm going to highlight is from October on the Friday Contenders Friday show, where he defends the title against Jackpot J-Rock, who the commentators mention is a rookie. He got this title shot by winning a quote-unquote lottery. Wolf comes out and has an immediate presence about him. Presence, when it relates to a wrestler, in my opinion, usually can't be taught. It can be improved on, but not taught. Usually it's just something natural. By presence, I mean a wrestler just has a way of commanding your attention and carries themselves like a star. It's in their facial expressions, their body language, how they walk, some things that are obvious, some subtle. It's just a general aura someone gives off when they come to the ring before they even wrestle. Wolf has all of this and he has it in spades. And I can see this right away as he comes out. My first impression of him is he's lean, athletic looking, and he has an intense and realistic looking scowl on his face. He's jawing to the crowd as he makes his way to the ring, and it's just this aggressive aura about him. When the bell rings, Wolf moves like I would expect him to move based on his look. He moves quick and snappy with these aggressive movements. It's this aggressive heelish urgency to what he does. As a new viewer, you'll quickly see he is a type of heel who's physical, ornery, and serious about winning, a determined and focused athlete, my favorite kind of heel. The match starts with Wolf locking up with Jackpot, and he immediately backs him into a corner. He gives him a clean break, and then he immediately comes right back at him and takes him down to the mat and pounds on him down there. Again, I like how Wolf is establishing himself right from the opening minute and clearly defining his wrestling persona. He's not stalling. He's not doing comedy. He's not cheating. He's just aggressive. The ref pulls him off Jackpot. He pauses for a few seconds, and then he goes right back and stomps him. The narrative here is set and clear of the rookie working to overcome the experienced champion, and the tone of the match of a resilient challenger is first established here when Wolf goes to deliver a suplex on Jackpot, and Jackpot slips out and rolls him up for a 1 count. Wolf misses a punch, and Jackpot counters with a standing flying kick that looks very smooth. Then he does a head scissors takeover, and when he goes for a monkey flip in the corner next, Wolf flips him right out of the ring. Wolf is right on him. He goes outside the ring. He drops Jackpot on the apron before turning the jaw to the crowd. I like Wolf's acknowledgement of the crowd. It works very well, and it would work very well when he's in a larger setting too, because it all comes off as very natural in his interactions. He's just very naturally arrogant, everything he does is looking very realistic. It's a nice touch how he rips the sign away from a fan and tears it up. Very old school, very interactive healing. Wolf leans Jackpot against a post, and he goes to chop him, but he misses, hitting his hand on a corner ring post. Jackpot reacts real well with his timing, especially for a rookie, and he immediately shoves Wolf right face first into the next nearest ring post. Back in the ring, Jackpot leaps off the top rope, showing off some really nice elevation. And Wolf shows off his athleticism and timing in response because he catches him with a crisp-looking dropkick. There's more great aggressive mannerism by Wolf, as after he splashes Jackpot, he grabs him by the head and slams him into the mat. This kind of attention to detail, slamming the head into the mat instead of just leaving his opponent on the mat where he already is another way that Wolf's just a very effective heel, in that he does an impactful, aggressive move that looks realistic like that after the main move. Nothing fancy, just intense. There's thought and realism behind everything Wolf does, and I can just see this right away. And that's the signature of a talented heel. The kind of athletic, aggressive heel I prefer that I think would ultimately do well on a major platform. We get more athleticism display from Wolf as he delivers a vertical suplex. He pops right up and delivers a leaping elbow. It's just all done very seamlessly. Then Wolf stomps on Jay and he gloats. Next, Wolf brings him to his knees, slaps him a few times, and Jackpot tries to fight back. And Jackpot sells it very good, as he should, because it looks like it actually legit hurts. Jackpot falls down on the mat, and he's covered for a 2 count. Now, Jackpot keeps trying to make a comeback, and Wolf keeps stopping him, and it's just done very well. So we just continue to get layers to that story of resilience with Jackpot. It's a good showing for a rookie here. It elevates him, even though he's taking a great deal of the offense against him. And that can be credited both to Jackpot's skills as a rookie already developing, and Wolf's skills to make a lesser experienced wrestler, but talented, who is on the receiving end of the offense, still look credible. Wolf's next major offensive sequence is 2 discus punches, and they have a real nice snap to them. When Jackpot finally does start to get his comeback, it means more because he already has taken so many hard shots. Jackpot rallies back and does a slingshot over the top rope onto Wolf. Then Jackpot throws him back in the ring. The next move he does is off the top rope, and the commentators call it a royal flush. It's very similar to a 360 splash, and Jackpot delivers it very well. It looks very good. He gets a 2.8 count, as he should on a move like that. It shouldn't be a 1 count kick out or something like that. It should be a very close to a 3 count. Jackpot does another move flying off the turnbuckle, but misses. And Wolf delivers a back suplex where he flips him into a forward position midair and then drives him face first into the mat. They call it a vertigo. Another great move. I'm just really impressed by the amount of different offensive moves Wolf does and how physically punishing they look, combined with Jackpot's excellent selling of everything. And this only adds to the intensity of well-delivered offensive moves. It's a 2.8 count because Wolf pulls Jackpot up with a slight grin on his face as he's doing it. Next, we get a very well-executed submission hold from Wolf. He hooks one arm under Jackpot's chin and pulls back one of his arms. He takes one ankle while Jackpot's on his stomach facing the mat and manipulates it by putting pressure on it. You have to see it. It's a very, very nice move. It looks realistic. It looks painful. And more attention to subtle detail here by Wolf as he slams Jackpot's face into the mat before delivering this move. It just makes the move look more impactful, and it makes him look more dominant. Now, Jackpot doesn't tap out, but he passes out. The refs come from the back to try to get Wolf to break the hold. Excellent match. Great storytelling. Again, determined rookie, and the execution of the match makes Jackpot look high level because he hung with a top guy, the champion, and only an extreme-looking submission took him out. Wolf looks dominant, threatening, and highly skilled. Again, he's a heel who is aggressive, he'll hurt you, and he jaws at the crowd, but he does not cheat. You could easily cheer for a guy like that with a slightly different presentation. The next promotion I'm showcasing is Memphis Wrestling. They air new episodes every week. They're taped out of the same venue called Memphis Wrestling Wrestle Center, and the show has a nice vintage Territory feel to it. The venue itself feels like one of the old studios that Territory Promotions used to tape in. It's also their training center. Jonathan Gresham is one of the coaches there. To the side of the door that the wrestlers enter the arena from the locker room to make their ring entrance, there's a commentator table, and this is also where the wrestlers go to do a lot of interviews and cut promos before and after the matches. This touch makes it feel very authentic to studio wrestling style that I remember when I first saw as a newer fan in the mid-'80s, the NWA Saturday night show that used to air at 6:05 p.m. on TBS. This setting adds to the whole ambiance and just adds a nice overall feel to the whole product. It's a real throwback environment, and I mean that in the most complimentary way possible. The show itself has storylines that flow from week to week. There's a regular roster of local wrestlers to get familiarized with and find ones that are your favorites, and the mic segments in front of the commentator table work very well to personalize the wrestlers to an audience. They bring in names frequently for shows as well. They recently had Danhausen, Jay Lethal, and Sandman come in for different shows. The wrestler I want to showcase here from Memphis is K-Toomer, and specifically his match from episode 191. He calls himself the Master of Fat Jitsu. What stands out to me about him is his general fire he brings whenever he comes to the ring. He's always energized. He's always hyped up. Just a general presence about him whenever I've seen him wrestle, and I've seen him a number of times now. He's billed at close to 400 pounds, and he moves well for a large man, mixing in spinning kicks and quick movements in general, and other moves you wouldn't expect from someone that size. So I think his whole presentation is unique and memorable, between the fire when he speaks, his general energy, and just his work in the ring. There's something about his style that kind of reminds me of Bam Bam Bigelow. His match in 191 is a grudge match against a gun show, another wrestler with a strong presence based on his look, general intense demeanor, and physical wrestling style. Before the match, there's this black and white promo showing clips of their feud, mixed with sound bites from each guy. It's very well done. It quickly brings you current on the feud and also showcases both wrestlers nicely. It's a simple premise being delivered here, and the kind of basic grudge match theme that was done frequently to great effect in the Territory days. It's about quote-unquote respect, and K-Toomer is going to make the gun show respect him, he says. The heel does not respect the face and states it loudly and repetitively. That's the basic premise, and it's all we need if the intensity of the match to follow is there. And a lot of us can relate to that too, right? It's relatable, dealing with someone who doesn't show you the proper respect you feel. In the context of pro wrestling, one person makes the other respect them by fighting them / bringing the fight to them. So when the bell rings, they immediately go at each other, exactly as they should in a grudge match. K-Toomer gets Gunshow in a Cobra Clutch. Gunshow quickly gets to the ropes. They trade punches back and forth. We get the first glimpse of one of K-Toomer's kicks that I like so much. It knocks Gunshow back through the second rope but not to the floor. The commentators reference both are former Memphis Heritage Champions, which is the main title there. They brawl out into the crowd, and the ref lets it go, again as they should, since this is billed as a grudge match. Gunshow picks up a steel chair and hits K-Toomer hard on the back with it, really lays it in. K-Toomer gets the chair shortly thereafter. He hits him back. Then K-Toomer clips Gunshow's arm into the chair and shoves Gunshow into a corner ring post. The ref eventually gets him back in the ring, and there Gunshow catches K-Toomer with a kick to the stomach and then delivers a spine buster on him. K-Toomer rallies back and he gets Gunshow in a Boston Crab. So we have a very even, very well-paced match. How they balance this is very well done, of who's on offense and who's on defense. A little bit at a time, just enough, and a back and forth. We're getting very physical hits, not fancy moves. We don't need them, just firmly delivered moves because this is a grudge match. The Gunshow gets out of the Boston Crab by getting the ropes, and K-Toomer follows that out with a sidewalk slam as his next major offensive move. When he bounces off the ropes, he gets caught in a spine buster. The Gunshow finishes off K-Toomer with a Fez press after bouncing off the ropes to deliver it, with the idea that the physical nature of the match wore down K-Toomer. Not a long match, but again, these matches don't always have to be long to be something that I really enjoy. I'm looking for what the quality of their presenting, and this was a very well done grudge match, very heated, and it should be fast. It shouldn't be a drawn out type match when it's like this. The next promotion I'm featuring is Pro Wrestling Magic out of New Jersey, and a match from late October at their Doomsday event with their champion ReVolVer Alex Reiman. Like I mentioned earlier with Stephen Wolf and New Texas Pro Wrestling, checking out the champion of an independent promotion as the first match you watch when sampling a new independent promotion is a good barometer, I find, to get an overall pulse of the promotion itself, and I find typically lends to seeing a strong roster up and down the card when you have a strong champion, someone that has a very good presence about them. I keep mentioning this about the wrestlers I'm talking about here, and it's a reason why I'm singling them out. But Reiman just has a presence about him that when he first walks out to the ring, he grabs my attention. He's got this methodical, confident, deliberate gait of the way he walks to the ring, this slight smirk on his face. The fans are cheering him, but the guy looks unhinged, like he would snap at any time. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing. I'm seeing elements of Cactus Jack from the early 90s in Reiman's general aura as he walks to the ring. He's got Brandon Downey and Lugosi accompanying him, and these two add to the aura as seconds. They have a nice presence about them, too. I've never seen Reiman wrestle before, but he has my attention right away, and I'm curious to watch his match and see what he brings to the ring. That's the effect a wrestler should have on a new viewer. The match is billed as Reiman's Roulette, which is an open challenge match for his title. So out comes Ricky Price, who commentators say is debuting in Pro Wrestling Magic. Reiman takes control pretty quickly here after the bell rings. After a brief lockup where they jostle for control, he knocks Price down with a shoulder block. Then he blocks a hip toss from him and throws one of his own, followed by a body slam. But instead of just doing a basic body slam, he walks around with Price a bit before slamming him. So I'm going to call it a walking body slam. I like how Reiman moves in the ring right away. It's methodical but deliberate, kind of no nonsense, and it matches the vibe he gave off as he came to the ring. This vibe that he could explode in anger at any time. He comes off as calm yet threatening at the same time, and that's not easy to do. On Price's first offensive sequence, he does an arm drag that sends Reiman out of the ring, and then he does a moonsault on the Reiman in his seconds. Reiman comes back quick, though, and slams Price into the apron. Reiman tries to suplex Price into the ring, but Rice gets out of it. He slips inside the ring. Reiman hammers him down from the outside. That's followed by an intense and seamless delivery sequence from Reiman of a hard forearm shot across Price's jaw, a hard slam, and 2 elbow drops off the second rope. They're good physical moves, and they grind Price down for a 2 count. What I'm noting and writing down here as I'm watching this is Reiman's very good at keeping the pace going. He's working over Price. Nothing's rushed. Everything's purposeful that he does, with little nuances added when he applies a basic hold, and I really like this a lot. For example, when he does a headlock on the mat, he doesn't just sit there and jaw to the crowd, but he grinds on the headlock a little bit for extra emphasis, and his facial expressions are there. That sinister look I thought from the start really made him stand out to me as a viewer and makes him look legitimately intimidating. Momentum shifts back a bit to Price when he gets a super kick in, then a chop and some forearm shots, and after some brief back and forth, he does a nice cross body press coming off the second rope that gets a 2 count. A spear from Price follows shortly thereafter for a 2.5 count, and this all builds very nicely to the finish. Price misses a move and Reiman just takes over and completely dominates. The very hard and realistically looking painful discus punch, some hard forearm shots to the back, and he lays all this in very well. A leg sweep by Price is reversed, and Reiman lays in more of those hard forearm shots that I like so much, followed by several other quick moves, including a neck breaker. The actual finish is a Death Valley driver, and it's done with impact. Good match, hard hitting by Reiman, and his style, again, is very methodical, but in an intense way to watch. And when he delivers a move, it has impact, even something basic like a forearm smash. You can really absorb what he does in the ring, and everything means more as a result. I'm looking forward to seeing more of his matches. The final promotion I'm showcasing here is NWA JCP Southeast, which stands for Joe Kazana Promotions. It's a designated territory promotion under the NWA. Billy Corgan acquired the NWA name in 2017 And in 2019, they launched a TV show, NWA Power. I've watched it almost from the beginning. It's always had a territory retro feel to it that I liked. Typically being filmed in a studio setting with lots of pre- and post-match interview segments. And the early episodes looked visually and had a very similar feel to the NWA Saturday Night 605 show, right down to the flags of various countries hanging from the rafters and only a few rows of fans. Earlier this year, NWA announced they would start having territory promotions, and they currently have Exodus Pro, Crossfire, and NWA JCP designated as such. They have the commonality of all being run by NWA talent, Exodus by EC3, NWA Crossfire by the Page Sisters, and JCP by Joe Kazana, an NWA manager and ex-wrestler. There's some crossover, it seems, with the wrestlers from NWA appearing on the territory shows, and vice versa, with some of the territory wrestlers being on NWA TV. And the match I'm showcasing is from Season 5, Episode 7, titled War Ain't No Game. It's a War Games match, which is very ambitious and cool for an indie promotion to have. War Games was a Dusty Rhodes NWA concept. It was introduced in 1987. Legend has it that Dusty was inspired by viewing Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome movie. The War Games concept is 2 rings side by side with a steel cage surrounding them. There's 2 teams, 4 or more on each team, and a new wrestler comes into the ring every couple of minutes from the opposing team. Once everyone is in the ring, the match officially begins. Sometimes you could win by pinfall, sometimes only by submission, which usually fits better for this type of match. The match here is a Country Gentlemen, AJ and KC Kazana, TVA, which is Big L and Devin Dixon, and Joe Kazana versus the Stu Crew, Zach and Dylan Stewart, the Zenith, JR Miller and TDT, and the Spank. We open with an interview segment where NWA announcer Kyle Davis interviews each team. They're outside in front of a wall. It's a very rough looking setting, very retro, very cool. Now, there's a lot going on in this match, but it's very well done the way they execute and film it. The filming is done intermixing a hard wide shot that feels like you're on a balcony a few rows from the ring, and it's edited together with a camera inside the ring. The match starts with Dylan Stewart and KC Kazana. They get the match off to a good start. They go back and forth with offensive moves. It's an even fight between the two of them. They even get in between the 2 rings and fight between the ropes. The highlights here include Stewart putting KC in a corner, wrapping up his arms under the rope, and just working him over with some very hard-looking punches. KC eventually takes control again when they're back in the center of the ring, and he catches Dylan with a double fist to the throat. Then he puts Dylan down on his hands and knees, and KC leaps up and comes down on his back twice in a row in a squatting type motion. The 3rd time he tries doing this, Dylan spins around and knees him in the crotch. AJ Kazana, Casey's brother, is in second. He comes in very aggressively and just grabs Dylan and throws him into the cage, and Dylan bounces off to good effect. AJ then grabs Zach Stewart's hands. He's standing outside the ring, and he handcuffs him to the cage. It's a nice touch. I'm getting 80s Terry Funk and Stan Hansen vibes from AJ. He's a rugged brawler. That's his gimmick. He's got a husky frame that suits it. I've seen him a number of times in NWA. The Kazanas work over Dylan, and then Joe Kazana slips in a bat to AJ, who starts using the bat to hit Dylan across the back. JR Miller comes in at the 2-minute interval to even things. He gets hold of the bat and starts whacking AJ and then KC. AJ eventually gets the bat back. He works over JR Miller. Things just get increasingly chaotic, but in a good way as more wrestlers make their entry into the match. The camera work and editing together of the 2 angles is done really well, and it gives you a good feel for the action without feeling choppy or feeling like you're missing something. And that's not always easy to do in this type of match where there's a lot going on. A chair is introduced into the action as well at some point. When Dixon's in there, he starts bleeding pretty quickly, and it's quite profuse. He's quickly awash in blood. Soon after, AJ's bleeding too. Joe Kazana's the last one in, and by this point, everyone is pretty battered looking. But that's how it should be, right? Bring in the heel manager last and let him pick the scraps, so to speak. One really cool spot in the match is when Dylan Stewart climbs to the top of the cage. He leaps down on the entire Kazana team, minus Joe Kazana. Another big moment finds a table in the ring, and KC Kazana gets put through it. There's an awesome finish with Dylan wrapping his arms in barbed wire and putting his sleeper hold on AJ. Meanwhile, Casey gets put in a nerve hold and he ends up tapping out. This is all very well done, the whole match. The violence is fitting for the match and it's not gratuitous. Sure, we had a chair, a bat, a table, and barbed wire, but it made sense. And the spots where they used it made sense, and they were well done. This was not a hardcore match. This was a brawl. And it was a fitting tribute to the legacy of War Games from someone who saw the original ones. So I look forward to seeing more JCP NWA shows. This was fun. It was a fun match. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe for free at russellfranklin.substack.com to hear future episodes.